Okay, my friends, to be or not to be. What does that have to do with Yale renaming their geology and geophysics department to represent the more biological, nature of Earth? Well, let's go into it and see, what does it mean to be or not to be? I think it means you stand up for what you believe is right, and then you be. All right, I thought it would be kind of cute to say, oh, to argue or not to argue by Shakespeare. But I'm going to tell you something. I just came up to see, I don't know, and I decided to look at it a little bit because I haven't read it in a long time, or even if I ever read it, I can't remember. But it says to be or not to be. That is the question. Well, what does he mean, to be or not to be? Well, I can tell you what he means. He means if you don't tell the truth, you are not even being. You are not even anything to consider as anything. To be or not to be, that's the question. Whether it's 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing them end them. You either die, sleep, do whatever, but you end you fight back. That's what it means to be. I thought it was a joke, but not a joke. Okay, my friends, I don't know. Again, this is Roger, Mudfossil University, and my friend Michael Mainwaring sent me this about the Kabbalistic law and treatise. And I don't know where I'm going to fit this into whatever I'm doing, but I find it kind of interesting, and I kind of find it important. Now, it says, long ago man received a great law, love God and love thy neighbor as thyself. And God, I am trying to understand who and what and how it operates, and I now believe God is literally everything. Now, so what you want to do is love God and love God as yourself and love your neighbor as God and love your neighbor as yourself, because it's all one thing, really, because we're all literally the same damn thing. All right, so now, this is one of the greatest examples of apparent duality, since it appears to contain two distinct propositions, and yet they are simply different expressions of the exact same thing. Agreed. No man could pretend to love God and at the same time despise or hate his fellow men. Can't do it. If we're all the same thing, we are literally the same thing. No man could genuinely love his neighbor without at the same time loving God. This is not an exclusive virtue of either the Jewish or the Christian faith, but it's a universal law. Agreed. Love of the Creator implies love of all creation, and love of all created beings is one with love of God, because they are literally God, as you and I are literally God. Now, it goes down and it says, in the Kabbalistic treatise known as the Sefer Atzirah. Hello. All right, a little brief interruption there. Now, as I was saying, in the Kabbalistic treatise, in the Sefer Atzirah, or Book of Creation, the columns are given as symbolizing the seven antitheses of life. Now, these are, well, I'm going to let them explain it because they do it magnificently in my mind. Wisdom and ignorance, wealth, poverty, fruitlessness, barrenness, life, death. They're just complete opposites. So it says, and then it goes down, beauty, ugliness, peace, war, dominion, bondage, life, death. It should be stressed that these opposites are apparent. I mean, we know everybody knows them. They are a fact. Different aspects of the same thing, or better expressed, opposite polarities of the same thing. They're the same thing. There is beauty and ugliness are the look of something. One of them you think is ugly, one of them you think is beauty, or in the middle. So, the forces that manifest as antithesis are made of a mixture of opposite tendencies, varying between abstract concepts of absolute positive and absolute negative character, which I don't think that exists, Thus, in the created world, nothing is absolutely beautiful or absolutely ugly. Everything is a mixture of some positive beauty and some negative gracelessness in varying proportions. And God alone is perfect beauty, and in his absence, absolute ugliness. Two conceptions that are beyond the grasp of the human mind. So there are things that we cannot really fully understand and comprehend. You just can't comprehend them. We know this is something that we really these are things that I know exist that I cannot put into a mechanical framework like I can to say how this was formed. That was a creature at one time, and it's soaked in a saltwater flood. The salt water protected and preserved this lung. And that lung was separated from the rest of the creature because it was coated with something called fascia. And that fascia is made by something called collagens and keratins and kerogens. And then I can go on and on and on. But I can get to the mechanical, how this got here. I can't get to how the creature that made it got here. And I know that creature that made it that got here had all of these same struggles. One day everything was great, and the other day everything was just miserable. And that's, here we are in the middle of this corona thing. Well, it's going to get great again. That's the way things go. Now, even light, I have discovered this. It has one side of it has almost no positiveness to it. I mean, has no interactiveness to it, and the other side is just completely interactive. And I could show that from experiments I did with Rod Warren over there in Australia. Everything I say I can stand behind, I can prove. And I'll show you the light right now. I honestly don't know how I get off on these tangents about light in the middle of this, but everything is so interrelated. I mean, there's nothing new. That's light accelerated, that's explosion, that's the white part of light, and there's a black part of light. You see this right here? There's a white part of light and there's a black part of light. That's light. That's light coming through this Venturi. Now let's look at it in its explosiveness that I'm talking about here. Now we can see both things. We can see there, remember I said there's a black side and a white side? Well, there's a little black spot. And they just walk away from the white. They are the extreme other side of explosiveness. They're not explosive. Look, they could touch each other. They just hang around together. They have nothing to do other than just hang around. The white ones explode like an atomic bomb. Two opposites of the same particle. And every molecule and every atom and every element is made up of electrons, which are these. They're a black part and a white part. And that's what this is. And you take 1,837 of them, makes a proton. Add one more, it becomes neutral and is a neutron. All right, there's so much, and I mean, this is something that should be looked at. Again, I don't know how I get off on these things, but when I do, I have to back myself up. I got to say, well, here's why I'm saying this, because everything I say is against somebody. That's my problem. It's like, I guess it was Shakespeare that said, to argue or not to argue, that is the question. I choose to argue. Oh, wait a minute, I guess it was, maybe that wasn't the question. Okay, my friends, I told you this would get deep, and it does not get deeper than this. Now, I have been trying to find who knew what, who's the first one that knew about creation and so forth. So, how can I determine who is the most legitimate and way back when? Well, I have determined, and I have 200-foot giants right here on my property, DNA certified. I find them, they're miles tall, not in dispute anymore. Now, who knew about that? Enoch. So I go back to see what did he say about all this stuff, and man, I'm telling you, woo-hoo-hoo. Now, and it's time to look this, because now we get into Sataniel, and this is where I was a little concerned, and I still am. I don't really have any clue about this because there's so many dragons And he talks about him. They all talked about him. It wasn't just Enoch. But Enoch talked about 2 mile tall humans, more than 2 miles. Now, anyway, it's a Jewish pseudographon written in the 1st century, deals with the heavenly ascent of the 7th antediluvian hero to the abode of the deity. Now, this gets really, really complicated. But it talks about the giants. The race of the giants recalls peculiar features well known in classic description and the Book of the Watchers. Now, let's see, I'm sort of skimming through this. Now, there was 2 leaders. There was Shemabaza and Azael. And the description of the Slavonic apocalypse is striking in that, in contrast to the classic Enoch account, the leadership over the fallen watchers is ascribed not to either one of these, but to Sataniel. So, all of a sudden he comes on Satan. And because when I read about it, he sliced his throat and he threw him to earth and all that in Revelations. So now we know that Sataniel has taken over from the original rebels. Apparently, this is what I'm seeing. And this is kind of gets very interesting. It says, a careful examination of the other details of fallen angels tradition and Slavonic apocalypse shows that the transference of leadership over the Watchers from those guys to Sataniel is not due to the author's ignorance. He knew what he was talking about. He wasn't saying, oh, well, and then it goes on a lot of detail. This guy that put this paper together, Andrei Orlov, did a good job. And I like the details, so I'm citing it as Mudfossil University accepted. So you are a very fortunate writer, my friend. Now, while in the early Enoch circle, presence of Adam traditions is either marginal or absent, it becomes very prominent in Enoch too. Enoch was God's best friend. He and God took him when Enoch was I think it was 348 years old or something. Enoch was no more, for God took him. I believe it's something, words to that effect. And that's how it's always been understood. And now I dismiss nothing anymore. The most ridiculous accounts are the ones that I take the most truth in, because from what I found, 2 miles tall creatures, gigantic. The Earth is nothing but creatures, and all of the planets too, Mars, the whole 9 yards. So it's time to start dealing with reality, or just stay hiding in the woods saying, oh, everything's fine, I can't see. All right, so my eyes are open, I'm seeing, I understand. They knew a lot more than we know, and then it goes on from that. There is texts that are just unbelievable. Well, everything's unbelievable at this point, but it's true. So what do? Do you stop reading? No, you just go deeper and deeper. And so I'm getting as deep as I can get, but I'm not drowning yet, and I may be even keep from being drowned, because I'm telling you, there is something else going to happen after this. Absolutely zero question about that. And there is a lot written that says it can be absolutely horrifying, miserable for eternity. Is that true? I don't know. Is it true that you can have an absolutely fabulous, wonderful life, in the afterlife? I don't know. All I could say is that that's the side I'm leaning towards. From everything I've seen, from what I have personally touched, witnessed, seen, and had reported to me by plethoras of people now that have been trying to get this off of their chest forever. And now I am the repository, and I'm telling you, my chest is crushed. There is so much to support what was written and laughed at and denigrated by the ones that we go to be taught. That's my rub. And they've laughed, and the laughs are over. All right? Well, they're over on their side, let me put it that way. Because if you can just go to school every day and continue to listen to what they've told you about the geology of our Earth and what it means to your existence, well, you have to do it to get a job. That's the problem. And that's what's got to stop. We got to deal with reality. I mean, if you don't deal with reality, I just don't. It's not. I can't. I can't work in that realm at all. It just doesn't even. And I've been in a realm like that where I had to resist a couple of times. Very specific couple of times that were very difficult to deal with, and I did, and I made it out pretty good actually. so. But you could, if you don't resist, you're like it says, to be or not to be. To be means you put up your defenses. To not to be is just to sit around and say, yeah, push me around, do whatever you want. And that's a hard road for me to think about. I mean, I had to do it a couple times too. I'm not saying I can't. You got to sometime acquiesce. But now, at a certain point, when you have so much evidence, you just can't do it. And then anyone that doesn't help is complicit in the problem. So don't be complicit.